welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network and on the BQN network as well. Little change here. This is the Star Trek Strange New Worlds edition of the Union Federation. While Star Trek Strange New Worlds and the Orville are kind of overlapping with each other, we're going to put out separate episodes for each, so that way people are getting what they want to hear and what they love. But you know what? We got a big episode of Strange New Worlds to talk about, and which means I need a crew to help me man this Union Federation starship. And of course, returning as always, my brother from another mother, the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, and our top security chief around here, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
What's up, going on? Good to be back. And nice to be backed up by some other Kevins.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little outnumbered here because joining us too, one of our good friends from the BQN as we continue our wonderful partnership with them. You can hear him on Galaxy Class. He is a stand-up guy, a great individual, and he knows his Trek. Mr. Kevin Scarf.
Hello, gentlemen. Nice to be here.
Welcome aboard, Kevin.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Pleasure. Yeah, this is gonna be a fun episode. Kevin, before we allow people on the Union Federation starship, Kevin, did you do your instant time on the Cerritos as per requirement?
Oh, the bunks in that hallway are really hard on my back, so I transferred off as soon as I could.
Yeah,
I don't blame you. Don't blame you at all.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not comfortable at all. And people get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and wake you up. It's terrible.
Yeah, well, hey, we understand, but we are here to talk about everything that is Strange New Worlds. But Kevin, since we have you here, with our wonderful partnership with BQN, tell us a little bit about your Trek love and where it comes from, and so people who are new to everything on the BQN can get to know you.
Well, when I was a young lad, many years ago, I was into all things nerdy, mostly comics and stuff. But I remember flying home on a flight from Vancouver to Toronto, and the movie on the plane was Star Trek IV, the one with the whales. And that movie was like, there's something here. And that was just before Next Generation started airing. I was a young boy, and then I remember the day that show, The Next Generation, started airing up here. I was in high school. I was at a drama club rehearsal, and I'm like, I have to leave. I have to go home because the first episode of the new Star Trek is on tonight. I cannot stay, and that's where things started. And I've been with the franchise ever since. And as much as I love Marvel Comics and Star Wars and Doctor Who and DC Comics, Star Trek is my number one fandom, bar none.
Understood, and can understand why that is. But I do want to ask you, because here at the Union Federation we cover both Star Trek and the Orville, and even though we've already had our episode covering this week's Orville, you had said you had watched it, and you're kind of experienced the Orville kind of for the first time, and you kind of jump back on with the relaunch of the Orville with New Horizons and its new look. How are you enjoying the Orville after 2 episodes of this new?
Well, to be honest, I've only watched one. I've only watched the very latest episode. I thought there might be a chance we would be talking about the latest episode of the Orville tonight, so I did watch it. I flipped on Disney Plus. It's on Disney Plus here in Canada, and watched the newest episode of the Orville. Now, my history with the Orville is limited. I've watched 3 episodes total. I watched the first 2 back when it first aired on Fox, and the feeling I got from it was, this show's trying really, really hard to be this Star Trek The Next Generation. Why do I need to watch this when I can just watch Star Trek The Next Generation? And I hear that my opinion is I don't know if it's unique, but lots of people love the Orville for what it is, and I am cool with that. I love that people love it. But I thought, I don't have time for another show, to add another show to my list of things to watch. So I just put it on the back burner. But I watched episode 2 of New Horizons, and I really liked it. I liked the cast. I liked their chemistry. I thought the effects looked great. The story was cool. And I think I'm going to have to go back and watch the other 26 episodes now. So...
I think you will find it's very enjoyable, and I think you're going to find that even though, yes, there's a vibe of Next Generation with it, it's also got its own legs that it stands on. And
Yeah.
I think you're going to really enjoy it. So we will have to have you back once you've watched a few more episodes under your belt and get an update from you on what you're thinking on the Orville.
I would be curious to get your opinion on something, because Amy and I, in the off season, we went back and we did some episodes here on Union Federation where we compared a Star Trek Next Generation episode with an Orville episode that had similar themes. And you're gonna run into stuff like that with any type of science fiction show that will have a similar type of story to as another one. But we put them together, and we discussed the similarities and the topics, and then we decided at the end which episode of which series dealt with the topic better. And it was a fun discussion. And that episode that you just watched, definitely, and we discussed it just recently yesterday when we were talking about the episode of the Orville, that it had some Star Trek season 7 Genesis feel to it. And also
definitely some body horror.
Yes. And I also found a little bit of comparison to episode 4, the one where Geordi and his old friend want to go to the planet and get taken away and turn into those creatures, so
no, I really had a good time watching it tonight, and I will go back for more when I can find the time.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it. There's a lot out there right now.
So much.
Yes, exactly. But speaking of a lot being out there, it's time to activate the quantum drive and talk a little Strange New Worlds. Now, by Union Federation guidelines, the next step to this before we talk Strange New Worlds is I have to hit this. That's right. Major spoiler warnings. We are going to be diving deep into the latest episode of Strange New World. So if you've not had a chance to watch it yet, go watch it. Rejoin the podcast. Get in on the conversation. We all, as always, make sure you leave some thoughts in the comments or something, because we like your input. But guys, let's talk a little Strange New Worlds. Security Chief Reitzel, would you care to make the latest addition into the captain's log?
Will do. This is our episode synopsis for Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. The air date was June 9th, ran about 50 minutes. The Enterprise receives a distress call from a shuttlecraft under attack from a warship while returning to the planet Majalis. Uhura uses Enterprise's phasers to destroy the warship. The shuttlecraft personnel are beamed aboard. A boy designated the First Servant, his father and physician Gamal, and Alora, president of Majalis, who is an old flame of Pike's. Alora enlists Pike to help return them to Majalis. Uhura and Noonien Singh investigate the shipwreck and discover its origins in a rebellious colony of Majalis and Gamal's government in a rebel plot. Gamal attempts to fake his son's death to save him, but the servant decides to beam down to Majalis. Alora invites Pike to a ceremony. Pike sees a previous servant's corpse, but a guard subdues him when he tries to stop the servant from being connected to the machine. When Pike awakens, Alora reveals why she betrayed him. The rebels were opposed to Majalis' tradition of sacrificing children to preserve the planet's core systems. Pike warns Alora he plans to report this to Starfleet and escapes back to his ship. Gamal advises Mbega on his daughter's condition and leaves the Enterprise for the colony, hoping to save the future servants.
Thank you so much for that wonderful log entry, Mr. Reitzel. But our guest, Kevin, what were your first reactions to this episode? What were you processing as the credits started to roll and you had
for me,
watching this?
This episode was the most like a classic TOS episode of any episode we've gotten so far. This screamed Kirk stopping a computer from controlling a society. There's the girl that he knew from his past. It really felt like a TOS episode to me, in a good way, in all the best ways. I really enjoyed this. I loved that. I loved the ending because sometimes our heroes don't always get everything they want. And that's where I came down on it. This, more than any other episode, and they're really going for a TOS vibe on this show, this was a TOS episode.
What about you, Kev?
I agree with Kevin on this. It definitely felt old school Trek to me. Just with, you know, the old flame type of thing and the type of, I mean, when you're learning about Allura and her planet and the way that they govern and their beliefs, it definitely felt like old Trek, something that Next Gen might have borrowed from or, you know, used from. And whether it was just the look, you know, the costumes and the weapons and the tech and stuff like that. And it's, you know, returning as new Trek, live action Trek is returning to this episodic formula, which I absolutely love, by the way. This really gives them a chance to kind of dive into these different cultures and dive into these type of stories again. And also in the meantime, highlighting several of the crew members. You know, we got Uhura doing her thing and being challenged through her rounds with security with Noonien Singh, and then also learning more about our doctor and, you know, what he's trying to do to help save his daughter and stuff like that. So it definitely had that vibe when I finished watching it for the first time.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys as well. Kevin, by the way, when Kev goes into his security training as you ensign through your security training in this episode, just lesson 8. Just not going to talk about it. just be prepared. The thing I really thought was interesting about this episode too is I felt like it was a little bit of a change up from how Strange New Worlds has been conducting itself so far. In the aspect of each episode we've had so far has really put the focus on one character in an A plot, and I really felt like this was an episode where everybody was kind of on equal footing here. And in fact, really maybe even more our guests on this episode really took the spotlight away from the crew outside of maybe Pike and the Doctor. Her had a couple of nice moments in here as well, but that was one of the things I noticed was like it kind of felt a little bit of a flip of some of the things they've been doing with Strange New Worlds. Did you guys feel that any, Kevin?
Well, that's the one thing I think that really does differentiate this from the original series, where that show was about Kirk and Spock and McCoy to an extent. This is an ensemble show too. Pike is definitely our lead, and Anson Mount is a great captain. But everybody is being given a chance to shine here. In this episode, like we said, it was Uhura. Spock got a moment, and M'Benga was great in this one too. And we got great guest stars this time as well. That happens regularly on this show where we're given the focus away from the captain and his best friends. And I like that. I like that we know our supporting. I feel like I know more about La'an, Noonien Singh than I ever learned about Uhura in 78 episodes of the original series, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. What about you, Kevin? What did you feel like? Did you feel like this was a little bit of different formula than what we've had in previous episodes of Strange New Worlds?
Yeah, a little bit. Definitely with, you know, going down to the planet that someone from the crew was familiar with, you know, and having a past and having a little romance as well, and it not working out again, you know, that type of thing. So, you know, we've seen that before, but it's as Star Trek fans, even though we see a similar type of trope, we enjoy the new interpretation of it and how it gets to its final conclusion.
I do want to talk about the cast a little bit here. And what I want to do, Kevin, because this is your first time on, I'm going to ask you so far for you, who has stood out in the cast for you? Who's been the members of the cast that you've gravitated to the most?
Well, of course, definitely Anson Mount. I mean, he is a dynamic captain and you can't take your eyes off him. And if you've ever seen him in person, I've seen him a couple times now, and he is just that dynamic in person as well. Celia Rose Gooding as Uhura, I think she shines as well. And there are some people who I think I want to see more of them because I love what they're doing. And that includes Rebecca Romaine. Like, she hasn't gotten a storyline yet. I want to know more about number one.
I think that's right. What about Kevin? You've actually been away for a little bit yourself on your other missions. I haven't actually gotten a chance to ask you that question. Now that you've caught up on Strange New Worlds and more, who's grabbing you out of this cast right now?
You know, obviously Anson Mount is doing his thing, and he's got this certain charm that I think fans are gravitating to, and I've seen him in so many other different roles, and not only is he a good actor, he knows how to make each character that he does, whether he's an anti-hero and hero, charming in one way or another. There's just these little things that he does, and he's done that great with his portrayal of Christopher Pike. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit later when we get to our article review. But the person that Kevin just made a good point. I want to learn more about number one. I feel like there's something there they've teased. But the character that I'm really kind of gravitating towards, just because I find her kind of quirky and fun, and we've touched on a little bit, is Jess Bush as Nurse Christine Chapel. Just the way she delivers her lines and her expressions, and the way that she works with Dr. Mbega and whoever the guest star is, and then just like the off-duty moments that we've previously seen. She's the one I'm kind of gravitating towards right now, and want to definitely learn more about her.
Yeah, I agree with you about Nurse Chapel, so I'm all there. But to Security Chief Reitzel, we let some extra people on the Enterprise this week. We had some amazing guest stars this week, and I got to tell you, Lindy Booth was great as Alora, but who stole the episode for me was young Ian Ho as the First Servant. This kid just had some energy. He was fascinating for being so young and playing such a complex character. I thought was an absolutely amazing performance, Security Chief Reitzel.
Yes, definitely. And I was looking up his IMDb, and he's been busy. His first credit I see is 2018. Of course, he's young. And he's been in a lot of Canadian productions, obviously, because this series is a Canadian production. And things to like The Handmaid's Tale, Corn and Peg, and The Mighty Express. He's done a lot of stuff here. The Expanse as well. He's been on there. And so it was, he kind of came in, and every little scene he was in, he kind of stole, especially when he's being scanned. And then the scene with, when he's playing with Mbega's daughter, that was really cool. But also I do want to go back to Lindy here, Lindy Booth. I thought she was really good. I thought that the chemistry between her character and Captain Pike was also really good. You believe that there was something there with, some history. And so when you get towards the end of it and you feel Pike's betrayal, you feel how he's feeling. But she's been around too, a lot of stuff when it comes to not only Canadian productions, but other ones too. But she's also in The Librarians, which I remember watching a while ago, and NCIS and some other Canadian productions as well. I thought she was really good. But I also liked Hussein Madhajiv. I thought he was really good in this as well as the elder Gamal, the so-called kind of first servant's father. I really liked his turn in this as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. All three guest stars were outstanding. Kevin, what about you? What did you think of our guest stars this week?
Agreed. They were all really brilliant. The Ian Ho on The Expanse, was he the young boy from the colony world with the alien dog?
He played the character Zahn.
Yeah, he was his sister tried to bring him back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's I knew I knew him. I thought they were all great. They are really drawing from the best talent. Like these are all three of these are Toronto-based actors, so they're drawing from the best that the Toronto acting scene has. So. Yeah,
it's always interesting to see when you're based out of a certain city with your filming, how you're pulling from that pool, and I think it's something that's becoming more and more common. You see, like when people film in Vancouver, there's a certain pool of actors that always seem to show up. Same with Toronto. But Kevin, you rated the security files over at our good friends at Den and Geek and pulled up one of their reviews for this episode.
Yes, I love our friends at Den and Geek, and this is by Lacey Bauer. Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode 6 review, and goes on to say Star Trek Strange New Worlds sees Pike reunite with an old flame and undertake a mission where succeeding looks an awful lot like failure in the end. She goes on to say, to be fair, this is pretty grim storytelling for a Star Trek series, but perhaps necessary reality check after the first run of Strange New World episodes, which generally involved happy endings, daring escapes, and hijinks all around. Not even every story can end well, and not every alien race will be good, at least not in the way that we understand the concept. The fact that Pike, who is so desperately wants to do something to help upend a civilization that literally powers itself with the lives of children, has no jurisdiction to do anything at all, is frustrating in a way that feels almost painfully realistic. And not for nothing, but Alora's insistence that our human society simply doesn't want to look at the sins it regularly perpetrates against its weakest members is, well, not entirely wrong. She goes on to say, perhaps Pike's constant desire to tell all and sundry about his presumable secrets, his death, destiny of suffering and physical agony, reflects his needs to believe in the possibility of changing it, i.e., if he tells enough people about the future he saw, it will force the future to change somehow, or if he tells the right person, they'll find the one that can fix it. But the fact that the first non-Starfleet affiliated person he tells turns out to be the leader of a culture that powers its own comfort through child sacrifice basically affirms why Pike, perhaps the brightest, most empathetic figure in the Star Trek canon at the moment, is never going to turn away from the future he saw on Boreth, no matter how much of us, read me, might wish he would. Pike is not the kind of man who would ever trade innocent lives for his own or ask someone else to bear the weight of the choices he makes. It breaks my heart because I adore this character and he deserves a better future than the one this universe keeps telling us is waiting for him. And she ends by saying, but it also means that when it matters, Pike will choose the right thing simply because he is not willing to sacrifice others for his own gain. It's what makes him such a great leader, and it's what makes his fate such a tragedy. It's what makes him such a great leader, and it's what makes his fate such a tragedy. I know a lot of Star Trek fans out there probably also watch Doctor Who, so I suspect that you will understand that this is, no matter how poorly I draw the comparison, I don't know if having a captain is a thing in fandom the way having a doctor is there. Mine is 9 for the record. But if it is, Pike is certainly mine, and it's episodes like this that remind me of why. And she gave it a 5 out of 5 rating. Now, what I wanted to touch on this article with you two guys here is that a couple of things, 2 notes. This episode ends on a downer note regarding Pike feeling betrayed. And this is one of those things that us Star Trek fans will say, this feels so Star Trek. And I remember watching a lot of episodic television when I was younger, from the 70s through the 80s. And most sitcoms, most drama series, cop shows, whatever, they always ended on a good note. The bad guy was captured, justice was served. That misunderstanding in that 30 minutes of your sitcom was figured out, ha, 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 laugh track. Everyone stood still while the credits rolled. You remember those things? But I remember a show called Miami Vice in the 80s. And it didn't always end on a happy note. Sometimes a bad guy got away. And that was the feeling I got with the end of this episode. Kevin, as our guest, did you kind of get that vibe as well?
Yeah. Sometimes you can do everything right and still things will turn out wrong. That is a lesson I learned from some other pop culture franchise, which is fleeting from my brain at the moment. I'm sure somebody has said that. It might even have been Picard. You can sometimes do everything right and still things don't work out the way you want them to. And that's what happened here. Like, the crew did everything they could the right way. They followed regulations. They broke regulations when they needed to. They thought they were doing the right thing, and maybe they weren't.
Yeah.
And I love the grayness of this episode. I love that not everything in the universe is black and white, and not everything in the Star Trek universe is black and white. And so to have those shades of gray here is a great thing, I think. It just means that future stories, you always are going to be on the edge of your seat because you don't know if things are going to work out right. And the fact that we've got one now that things didn't go the right way is I think that sets things up even better for the future.
Kyle, what say you? Same topic.
Well, first of all, if you're going to do a Doctor Who comparison, it's going to be Pike to the 11th Doctor, because he's trying to chase that Matt Smith quaff from
record
levels. But what I liked about this, and Kevin, we've had this conversation before with other of the more recent Star Trek shows, is how they have gone too dark at times. And what I liked about this episode was, yes, it was a little bit of a downer ending, and it was a little bit of a darker thing from what we're used to from Strange Worlds. But it was heavy and it was dark, but you still feel that sense of light to it. There is a feeling of positivity that comes from this episode because it feels like a TOS episode, because it feels like, because we're in episodic television, you know, you're not necessarily carrying the weight of this episode throughout the rest of the season. And I think that's something to where it makes this work a little bit better, because they're not doing it every week, or you have this storyline that's weighing you down with such heaviness every episode. And so I think it really worked well for this tablet. So we know it's not always going to be the glamorous, happy ending in every episode of Strange New Worlds. And I'm going to get a little bit more into this when we get into our away missions, but I think this was an important episode of Strange New Worlds for another reason too. So
the other thing that this article brings up is something that every Star Trek Strange New Worlds fan is thinking in the back of their brain. And especially when we see how well Anson Mount is his portrayal of Captain Pike, is knowing what happens to Pike in Trek canon. Does it make it hard for the viewer when you find yourself really liking his portrayal of this character, knowing what's supposed to eventually happen? Is there a little part of you that's wondering, like, is the last episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds going to be, that mission that we find out in, the original series? Or are you kind of hoping that the fans have their way and maybe we never get there? Or is there going to be another timeline to, like, save Pike, save Pike? I know we're all thinking it, so I got to ask it. Kevin, what do you think?
So many stories have a character with a destiny, right? And we know what Pike's destiny is. And I don't want to see that changed. I love him, and I think it makes him one of the most tragic figures we've ever seen on Star Trek, I think, because we love him so much and we know how he's going to end up. We don't want that to happen to him. I think this makes the original portrayal of Pike from the original series that much more sympathetic and tragic. So as much as I love Anson Mount, and as much as I love his Pike, I don't want to see things change. Things need to play out the way we have been told they're going to play out. And I'd love to see him try to keep changing it, but just to know that, he is a good, decent person who is set on this path that fate has laid out for him. I as much as I'm going to hate to see it, I think I need to see where this goes. If we see it on screen at all, we don't need to see it on screen. We just need to know that it's going to happen.
Well said. Good point. Kyle, what about you? The reviewer in this article, kept saying that he seems to always bring it up with someone that he trusts, that he knows his fate. He's going to die.
I think in this aspect, it's one of the things that makes the Pike character so interesting, because we know his fate. And I think part of the issue is, again, we have an actor who's doing such a phenomenal job with the character that it makes it harder, and because we become more attached. I know a lot of people right now who have moved Pike up their captain's popularity list very quickly already. And that's a testament to the wonderful job Anson Mount has. But I also think because of that, I'm in agreement with Kevin. I don't want to see his fate changed. Now, what I would be down for is if, let's say, Strange New Worlds runs 5 seasons per se. Even if it ends where we don't see that event happen, and maybe we see it somewhere down the line in like a Strange New Worlds film or something like that. I think if you end this series, you end it on something of a positive note, because even though we know what's coming for Pike, I think because people have beloved this character so much, to not get to that moment and let us just, we know it's coming, but let us accept that in our own ways instead of having us live that moment, I think is going to be the right call there. But I don't want another timeline. I don't want to see something happen to change Pike's fate, because when you start that and you create another timeline, to me, that's something they've already kind of messed around with a lot, especially with like Picard and especially this past season. I don't want to see that for Strange New Worlds. So I I don't know. The only other option I could see is oh wait, somehow we've transport that right before that happens, Pike gets transported to the future where Discovery is. I don't know, but just let it be. It's a classic Star Trek storyline, and I think it's incredibly important to canon, and I think it's an incredibly emotional moment that's been made so much more powerful by this series and by the wonderful Anson Mount.
Awesome. That's good. Those are good answers, guys. All right, Kyle, back over to you.
Yeah, so we are going to take a quick break here, let you know what else is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. And when we come back, we're going to discuss a little trivia as well as go into some away missions. But first, here is what is happening on the Fandom Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Blooded Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPodNetwork. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Welcome back to the latest episode of Union Federation, episode 132, Strange New World, season 1, episode 6, Lift Us Up Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Now we're back, and Kevin, as our chief security officer, you always found some trivia for us. You've been very good at that. You have some trivia for us this week.
Well, yes, as our guest Kevin alluded to earlier, that this had a very TOS feel. Well, that's because, well, this is a new script based upon an unused original series script by Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry. So there you go. Lindy Booth, who played Alora, co-starred with Rebecca Romaine, who played our number one Una, on The Librarians. And this episode bears a strong similarity to Ursula Le Guin's 1973 short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelius. Both depict a seemingly utopian society where prosperity is predicted on the suffering of a single child. Now, Kevin, as our guest, you said that you had some location trivia. Now, for those of us that aren't familiar with where you live and where you are, let us know that, and let us know a little bit about that location trivia for this episode.
Yeah, so I live just about an hour's drive north of Toronto, and they film both Discovery and Strange New Worlds in the city of Toronto. So oftentimes, especially when they're outside, one thing I love about this show is it seems to be there's a lot more location shooting than on some of the other earlier treks where you were stuck inside studios. And so I watch the shows and go, hey, I've been there. I know where that is. And this week I watched in like that house looks so familiar. And It turns out I never have been there, but it is a National Historic Site of Canada called Parkwood National Historic Site. It was the original home of the founder of General Motors of Canada, and it was built in 1915. Now, you may recognize Parkwood Estates because it has been in many, many, many films and TV shows. Just a sampling includes 12 Monkeys, Anne of Green Gables, Chicago, the movie Fever Pitch, the show Hannibal, Hollywoodland, The Killjoys, Lost Girl, The Expanse, Monk, Murdoch Mysteries, which is the longest running Canadian mystery show in history. It's a very bizarre show that I don't know why people love. It's like a Victorian CSI set in Toronto, turn of the 20th century. Yeah. In one episode, he created a fax machine in like 1904. It was quite weird. Queer as Folk, Relic Hunter, Shadow Hunters, The Expanse. The X-Men, the first X-Men movie was filmed here too. So this place does a lot.
What's the name of the estate again?
It's called Parkwood National Historic Site, and it is in the town of Oshawa, Ontario, which is just east of Toronto.
I found it fascinating that obviously they went to a physical location, as you mentioned, but there was that one overhead shot that kind of pans down when the security guard is running away. And to make it seem like it's a floating city, they obviously put like blue-green tarps around certain areas and then like superimposed like the special effects to make it look like it was a floating thing. And I thought that was really cool. Is that what they did it look like?
I believe so too. And there was one shot where you could see reflection of the shuttlecraft in the fountain.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought that's really, really cool. So, there's not any lava flowing around Parkwood Estates.
Darn it!
On Majalis. But if you want to visit, it's open. It's open to the public.
That's
you
cool.
can even host your wedding there.
Nice.
That's very, very cool. But gentlemen, it is time. We've wrapped up our trivia, but it's time to activate that transporter because we're about to go on some away missions. Okay, away mission number 1. Is the price worth it? We see that Majalis has an advanced society with technological and medical breakthroughs, but there's a price to pay for this, and have them having that light, and it's an incredibly high cost. This episode, I think, is also a great episode as a test of the Prime Directive, because we see here where this is not a civilization that's part of the Federation, and you see Pike kind of just overriding what the Prime Directive is to try and stop this child from being basically sacrificed, so this society can continue on. And we see where there's even been a split within the society itself about this. My question is this, because we have Pike, who has very much stand his ground, and I think has already defied the Prime Directive a couple of times in this series, or really skirted the plane about it. Do you think this episode felt like there were some Prime Directive issues with it? And how do you think, if you do, how do you think they handle it? Because I found that there was so much interesting about this, because we don't see too many societies that are this advanced that aren't part of Starfleet in anything. So I think that made it for a very unique twist. Our guest, Kevin, what are your thoughts on this?
I loved the fact that the planet had its own Prime Directive, and they weren't going to share their technology with the Federation because of their Prime Directive, which basically was don't tell anybody about the first servant. That's their Prime Directive, right? I feel like Pike does go up to that line, but he never crossed it in this episode. I don't think he uses Starfleet regulations to get what needs to be done, right? Like, Alora did not want him to investigate the first encounter with the shuttle, and he's like, no, we have to. They fired on us. We have to investigate. So he's using Starfleet regulations to sort of get around the Prime Directive here, but also the fact that he has a personal connection to this woman, also muddies the waters here as well. So I don't think Prime Directive is as big a deal in this episode as some people might make it out to be. Am I wrong here?
No, I can see your points. What about you, Mr. Reitzel?
It's interesting because, as you alluded to, when you come across a planet with a lot of technology, maybe even stronger than the Trek's crew or more advanced, and there's no treaty with them that would bring them into the Federation, you're wondering, okay, what nefarious reasons are hiding underneath the surface there? And I'm just kind of going like, okay, was there a meeting at Starfleet's, Starfleet there in San Francisco going, okay, these guys, why aren't they with it? Oh, they kill kids. All right, yeah, okay. It's just like there's these little things underneath there that you kind of makes you watch after you watch this episode going, why aren't they? And it's not necessarily that Starfleet maybe knew that, but that the society knows the guidelines or knows what type of world, go into an alliance and become part of Starfleet, and share technology and help each other out, where they're kind of, in a way, they're kind of hidden xenophobic, where they'll show you what's in front of the curtain, but they're not going to show you what's behind the curtain. And that's why they haven't reached out. And technology wise, they don't have to, they have, obviously medical, stuff on their side and science and all kinds of things, especially when the kid challenges Spock, and, we get a little bit with Mbega and, the doctor and the kid. Sometimes, and it's fascinating to see these planets that they can thrive on their own, no matter how weird their beliefs are or how different, certain things are, as fans, as we watch us going, yeah, that's not a society I want to be part of if that's what they believe in, and so it kind of challenges how we think as well. And so it's one of those things that makes Star Trek continuously fun to explore with the writers, and that they can put a little twist on stuff that we kind of we're familiar with. We're like going into this planet, you're like you feel like you've seen this before, but let's see how the writers are going to surprise us.
Yeah, I think those are both good points. For me too, I felt like for Pike it was you guys talked about it earlier, it was a no-win situation, because you have this one child who's sacrificing for the greater good of his entire society, and without him, their society collapses. So, as horrific as it is for what happens to this child, you save this child to sacrifice the entire society and the lives of all these other things. Because I mean, the way that Allura describes it is like, if this child doesn't make the sacrifice, not only does their society stop, I mean, the whole city collapses and their whole infrastructure gets destroyed. You're basically destroying the civilization by not doing this. So that's where I think for me, that would have felt like the prime directive was in, because you're not talking about, you are literally talking about, if you save this child, you're destroying that whole civilization. And so I think that made for a very interesting point. And again, it feels like there's nobody who wins. You have this child making this ultimate sacrifice, but you lose this amazing society, and it's like, how do you cope with that? Is the needs of the one greater than the needs of the many? I think is something that you've got to kind of decide here with this episode. So it's a very heavy topic.
I loved that we were given the impression that even though it was a lottery and this child was chosen, he goes into it willingly, that he knows what is going to happen to him. And it's not until he sees the dead body of the previous first servant and that he realizes really what he's gotten himself into. I mean, I think a lot of it is this sort of like almost cult mentality that's around him, telling him how wonderful he is and how he's doing the right thing for the entire planet, for the, I don't know how many billions of people who live on the planet. And that's a lot of pressure to put on a little kid, right? and he's played so strongly and intelligently that we almost see him as an adult because of the way he holds conversations with Spock and with M'Benga, and yet we don't really see how innocent he is until he has that moment when Pike pulls back the shroud on the body.
Yeah, I think Kevin Chief Mr. Reitzel, you had the perception versus the reality for him in that moment. He had this fantasy in his head from all the celebrations and everything, Kevin, and then they pull that tarp off Mr. Reitzel, and then all of a sudden reality hits, and reality is a lot worse than what my perception was.
Yeah, Kevin said this was a cult type society. No, they're a cult. That's what you do. You bring people in under praise and promises, and then you get down underneath the layers, and you see what the total cost is, and who really is in charge, and who's pulling the strings here, and you're basically a servant to someone's idea of how things should be run.
So I want to head into away mission number 2. As we've been doing our run of Strange New Worlds, we've always called away mission number 2, getting to know your crew. This, I think, was a unique episode in the aspect of a lot of spotlight was on Pike, obviously, with the love interest and everything like that. But there wasn't really anybody who, I don't want to say nobody got put to the side, but several characters had a little bit of a spotlight moment in this. So Uhura had a little bit with her security training. Spock had a great moment with the first servant. But I really think where a lot of the focus was very interesting was with Dr. M'Benga, because we're still learning him. He's very interesting in his approaches, and obviously this situation with his daughter. And I think that was one of the highlights for me with this episode is here he maybe finds something that could be a cure for his daughter, and he's denied it. And then we get what to me was one of my other favorite scenes of this episode is that heartwarming scene between the first servant and his daughter. And what I liked about this too is we see some little signs that his daughter is getting tired of living this existence of being transported in a buffer all the time and what she's missing out on. And I'm wondering, guys, is this going to become a piece of conflict that maybe Dr. M'Benga has to deal with at somewhere down the line going forward, that his daughter's going to be like, I don't want to be like this anymore. Let me live whatever life I'm going to live because he might never find a cure. I'm curious to see if you guys felt that from his daughter, or if maybe I'm just reading something into it that wasn't there. Mr. Reitzel.
So a question, remind me, guys, I was trying to remember while watching this episode of the secret that he's holding his daughter in the transporter buffer to help find this cure to save her life. Remind me, is it a secret? Does everyone know about this? Because I forgot who. Some people know and some people don't, right?
Yeah, I don't think the captain knows.
That's what I was wondering. Okay, but
I think Una knows. I believe Una knows. Una knows.
Chapel, does she know?
I don't think so.
What about the engineering chief that was like doing
Hemmer.
some adjustments? Yeah, and then like M'Benga's like, stop what you're doing.
I think Hemmer knows something weird's going on, but I don't know if he knows what he's got in there.
Okay. So it's still a secret about her daughter. Okay, about his daughter. Okay.
Yeah.
Played by Sage Arundel is Rukia. Really, really cute actress, by the way. She does a really good job. I enjoyed the book reading scenes there. This was a really nice moment towards the end with the Elder Gamal, played by Hussein, of the fact that he has this medical history. He's a doctor. And that even though he doesn't have the cure, he is able to say that he has something that he could give Dr. M'Benga to help, maybe eventually find something and give him something to work on, I guess, was the impression that I got from that conversation. And I'm still trying to figure out, if holding the secret's going to be the best thing. Because if I'm Dr. M'Benga and I have my daughter inside the transporter buffer for the Enterprise, I would find a way to have a backup somewhere else, maybe. And I don't know why he's hiding the secret from the rest of the crew. I don't know if there's something else going there, but I find that fascinating. And I'm warming up to Dr. Mbenga. I wasn't, the first half of this season. I'm not. I haven't been as warm to his character, drawn to his character as of yet. But this episode opened up a door for me.
What about you, Kevin?
So we had seen Mbenga in 2 episodes of the original series. And on that show, he's not the chief medical officer of the Enterprise. He serves under McCoy. So that leads me to wonder, now this is all just headcanon, if maybe he gets punished for what he's doing with the transporter and his daughter and gets demoted so that he's no longer the chief doctor on the ship. That's just some headcanon that has come to me recently. Like,
interesting.
Why is he still on the Enterprise but not chief medical officer under Kirk when he was under Pike? That was a question I had. That explains it to me, that by breaking these rules and using ships.
He's using the emergency medical transporter.
Yeah, but he's using not the services, the
resources.
Resources. That's what I'm looking for. The resources of the ship for personal gain, personal reasons here, and that could be a reason why he doesn't get promoted or gets demoted later on. That's just a thought that came to me. I like the character. I like his fishing hat. I like his ease with Nurse Chapel. But I also like that he's guarded because he's got this secret. And I'd also love to know where her mother is. And I wonder if we'll see her.
Yeah, I don't think Starfleet's going to be too happy about keeping a child in the transporter buffer under these circumstances.
No, I don't think so.
And you bring up the McCoy thing. I think it's one of two things. Either this gets caught and he gets knocked down a peg, or I could see where there's maybe a tragic ending to this, and he feels like he can't be chief medical officer.
That's a possibility
anymore.
Too.
Either. So I think there's some interesting things there. But I want to give each of you guys just a quick chance here to, I know, because like I said, this episode really hit on several different characters. Was there anybody else within the crew that you felt got a nice moment in this episode? Kevin, Mr. Reitzel?
Yeah, I love seeing the character development of Uhura, especially going through security training with Lon. And I want to see Lon loosen up a little bit. I'm glad she's good at her job, and she's teaching Uhura the ways of security and learning certain things on their own. And that's something that everyone should learn, and she's doing a great job with that. And I love the fact that she gives her credit for this finding that she found, and that she was going to be the one that was going to present her report to Pike. I thought those moments with them were good, and I'm looking forward to seeing another side of Lon, so this security badass chief that we love, but I just want to see another facet.
Come on, Kevin, it's just going to take another round of Enterprise bingo.
Hopefully. I like to see her play that.
Now, what about you, Kevin? I know we talked a little bit about Uhura earlier. For you, that was a standout. Was there anybody else in the crew that you felt got a good moment this episode?
I love La'an in this episode, actually. I love that everybody knows how La'an operates. Everybody knows what her 7 rules are, except Uhura. Pike is giving little digs at Uhura, like, oh, watch out for rule number 7. Everybody knows how she operates. And La'an doesn't really care. Like, this is the way security works. So I love that about her. She's a great character. They're all great characters on this show. They've really drawn some really great characters here.
One quick moment I want to throw out. I love the scene with the First Servant and Spock when they're talking about the subspace signals and everything like that. And the kids just going one for one with Spock. I thought that was just a great, fun little sequence there.
Mm-hmm.
But
for the record, there was another trivia I had about that scene, but it was like 3 paragraphs long.
Yeah,
and my eyes started to glaze over reading it. I'm like, I'm not including this.
we needed science officer Haley Stoddard here for that.
Yeah, I could not read that because I was reading it going, I feel dumb.
Is there some real science in there?
Yeah, there's a lot of real science in there.
Yeah.
So, before we close up, guys, any last things you want to bring up about this episode of Strange New Worlds? Mr. Reitzel?
Yeah, I just want to say, Kevin, thanks for coming on, man. It was good to finally meet you. I've heard your voice quite a few times on your podcast, and it was nice to actually podcast with you, man. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been great to be here. I love this episode. I've loved this whole series. I'm really easy to please though too, so I'm generally a positive guy, and even bad Star Trek is better to watch than a lot of other things that are on TV. So, but this was not bad Star Trek. This was exceptional Star Trek, I think.
Can I ask you though, because one of the criticisms that we've discussed here on Union Fed regarding the recent live action new Star Trek was Strange New Worlds returning to episodic format.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thoughts on that?
I like a serialized story as well. Don't get me wrong. I think for me, the issue that's happened with the first, we've got 6 seasons now of live action new Star Trek, is that they have great ideas and they know how they want to start and they know how they want to end, and they just seem to take too long to get there. If those stories were shortened, I think maybe going forward with having only 10 episode seasons might be good for Discovery, because I do love the characters. I love the characters both on Discovery and Picard. I just don't think they're being served all that well by the stories they're given. And I would like to see, I'm hoping that season 5 of Discovery, which has just started filming down the road from me in Toronto, I'm seeing all the posts about that. I'm hoping that maybe we're a little more episodic and that we get more character stuff, especially with some of the bridge crew. And I feel like Stamets has gotten the short end of things lately on that show too. I'd like to see more Paul Stamets.
Agree with you there.
I think he fits in on the ship well there, Kevin.
Yeah.
With that, it is time to close up this episode of Union Federation. But before we go, we got one little piece of business to take care of. Let's open up some subspace signals. Of course, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. And of course, also our YouTube channel. Go there, give us a like, subscribe, share it out. We are continuing to grow our YouTube channel. And you can find the Union Federation itself on Facebook. We have a wonderful Facebook page where we talk about all the happenings of the Orville and Star Trek. You can email us directly at theunionfederation@gmail.com. I am Kyle. You can find me on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Mr. Wright, so where are you at on the socials?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. You can, of course, also find me at the Union Federation Facebook group. And I'm also now a new member of the BQN Collective.
Yes, we've all been assimilated by the N is for Nelson.
Yes, N is for Nelson.
Kevin, where can people find you on social media, and where can they find you on other podcasts?
So my main Star Trek podcast is Galaxy Class, a Star Trek The Next Generation podcast, which I do with the N of BQN, Miss Amy Nelson, and also Joe Keegan and Rhea Papagiorgio. We have a great time on that show talking classic Next Generation, let's say. You can find me on Twitter at True North Nerds, which is a podcast I do with some local friends where we talk about all kinds of general nerdity and geekery, most likely these days Marvel and Star Wars, because that keeps being fed into our eye holes on a constant basis. I do another podcast about live theater because community theater is one of my passions. I do a show called Stage Whispers. And also I am on a Star Trek fan audio drama. I don't know if you guys know about this. It is called, what is it called? Because it comes out so irregularly, and I've recorded the episode so long ago. Endless Vigilance is what it is called. I play the commander of a space station, and it's a really cool show that a friend of mine has set up, and we've got really great voice talent on it. So look for Endless Vigilance in your podcast app of choice.
So cool. I like that.
Yeah. So it's a Star Trek fan audio drama.
Nice. Well, that is very cool. And of course, too, we do have our new partnership with the BQN, which has brought wonderful people like Kevin to join us. And I have had the honor of being on an episode and surviving a batlift battle on Galaxy Class.
Yes, you did.
So, Rhea's was a little scary with her chainsaw on that episode, but
you gotta watch out for Rhea.
Yeah, exactly. But you can find the BQN on Twitter and Instagram at BQN Podcast, and their Facebook group, the BQN Collective, where that's all for the listeners at the BQN as they continue to grow and do wonderful things with Star Trek themselves. Mm-hmm. Finally, we're going to take a look into the Orb of Prophecy for next week, Mr. Wright. So what is you're the captain of the ship when we're talking Orville. What are we going to be talking about with Orville on our next Orville themed episode of Union Federation?
So we had a discussion this last episode talking about this episode 2 of Orville New Horizons, which our guest Kevin here has seen, where it got a little dark. And we discussed that. And the first episode was kind of like the hangover of what happened with the Kalon, which also was kind of dark because of the prejudice towards one of our cast members there, crew members, Isaac. So the episode's called Mortality Paradox. We were kind of hoping we'll get a little bit lighter episode. So I don't know if that title lends to that or not, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. That's all I got for you. Episode airs June 16th.
And of course, we will be back next week too to cover everything that's happening with Strange New Worlds as season 1 continues on with episode 7, The Serene Squall. That episode is also airing on June 16th. Everything comes out on Thursdays anymore. Let's split it up, and can we split it out a little bit so we can actually have time to watch these things?
I did notice, for you fans that are curious that are following the Orville new episodes, that here in the Pacific time zone, it actually dropped at 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, which would make midnight for the East Coasters there. So if you happen to be up and you want to catch it earlier, I noticed that it was ready to go at 9 p.m. Pacific Coast there on Wednesday night.
Well, again, thank you, Mr. Reitzel, for doing a top-notch security job as always this week.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin, thank you for joining us. It was an honor to have you, and we hope that you will join us again for future missions on the Union Federation.
I would love to. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for coming on, Kevin. Much appreciated.
Again, everybody, thank you for listening. Until next time, hailing frequencies are now closed.